Hi, everybody. Today, I want to take some time to talk about progress, not perfection. And so, if you've been in what I call the weeds, if you're continuing to work on your goal and you're starting to go through the discomfort of the growth, and you're starting to say to yourself, this is getting awfully uncomfortable. I'm not liking this. Or, this is becoming hard. If you're starting to have those conversations with yourself, then we need to revisit again about progress, not perfection. And Earl Nightingale in The Secret, this is what he talks about so well. I know for myself, and even in the past, I've talked about, things have to be perfect. Or I would say to myself, I'll start that new project when da 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 da, when the money comes, or when the time's right, or I'll start it in a month. I start getting into that those old patterns that I used to have. And I remember I used to do that all the time, full of excuses, full of justifications, always waiting for that perfect time to get there. And I remember the first time that I heard Earl Nightingale discuss progress, not perfection. And it was just such a big game change for me. I started to realize that the growth was in the progress. The goals I set were to grow. Yes, I definitely wanted to reach the result. Yes, I wanted to be able to say I've attained my goal and I've reached it. But more so, what I was doing was the person that I was becoming, the new identity that I was embracing, the new identity that I was growing into, the new standards that I've set for myself, that the prior me, if you want to call it that, wasn't going to accept anymore. That's what growth ends up turning into or becoming. The goal is to grow. The result is the payoff of the growth. So when you're in the weeds, so to speak, and you're starting to move towards that new goal that you've set for yourself, and you're going through, some uncomfortable days, say you're stretching for that new result that you're working towards, what are the new routines that you have to set for yourself? What are the new standards that you're starting to, basically become non-negotiables? Those new standards that you're like, this is the identity that I'm moving into. This is the person that I feel really good about myself that I'm becoming. And I'm not going to negotiate with myself anymore. If you say to yourself, I'm going to start getting into shape, or I'm going to start managing my finances, or I'm going to scale and grow my business, you're not going to negotiate with yourself. If you're continuing to sleep in late every day, that new standard and that new identity is, I'm a person that gets up early. I'm a person that starts my day positively. I'm a person that feels good about what I'm doing. And I know for myself, I was having a great conversation with someone and they're like, I just don't like getting out of bed early. And I said, well, we're not going to negotiate ourselves with that. We're going to set that new standard and we're going to make that our reality. And we're going to make that our reality starting today. So we're not going to hit that snooze button. We're not going to continue to stay up late and sleep in. We're going to say to ourselves, I'm a successful person, and this is the standard that I've set. And when I set these standards, I feel empowered. I know that I'm moving towards my goal, and I'm growing into that person who has the results that I say I really want. And, that becomes the reality. And, over time, it starts to feel better and better and better. When you give yourself a command and you stick to it, and you don't let the outside environment control how how you're moving towards those goals, you stay firm within yourself. And that's what builds self-esteem. Yes, going outside and, getting external validation might make you feel good for a couple minutes, but what keeps you going and what really builds that personal fortitude is, telling yourself, this is what I'm going to do. And you follow through. And you make that your standard norm. You don't negotiate, you don't deviate, you make the decision and you stick to it. And I know for myself, it's just been so changing. It's literally been life changing. And it feels so incredibly good and so empowering to stick to what I said I was going to do, even when, there are days that I don't want to do it. That's the standard. That's the identity. And I know that as I stick to that, and sometimes I just break it down into little small manageable pieces. And, we talk about that. Small base camps, small achievable goals. Start with that. Those small things, you take every day. Say you accomplish 3 standards and you meet 3 of your goals every single day. After a week, that's 3 times 7, that's 21. They all build. And next thing you know, a month will go by, a couple months will go by, and you're almost say to finalizing your result and your goal. And you know that you've done that. You made the decision, you stuck to the goal, and your result is your reward for the person that you've become and the standards that you've set. And I don't know about any other feeling that feels any better than that. That is a result that doesn't fade. Not negotiating your standards, that stays permanent. How do you build consistent momentum? You get the empowerment and the self-esteem. Willpower, you can willpower for a little period of time. But when you get that solid self-esteem, when you consistently reinforce your identity, that this is the person I'm going to be no matter what, and you're like, yes, I did it. I knew I could. And you get that empowerment and you just feel so incredibly amazing. That's what reinforces. And that's what we talk about when we say progress, not perfection. If you falter a little bit, you know what? Don't worry about it. You just stick to the plan. You stick to the goal. People say they dust off their knees and they get back up again. You just say, you know what? I'm not going to negotiate. And that's the biggest thing. Every time you let those little choices slide, you let those little decisions, you're like, maybe I'm not going to, I can do that one tomorrow. We don't want that kind of momentum to build. And that's where things can slide off very, very quickly. We want to stick to, this is what I said I was going to do. These are the values. These are the standards. And this is what I'm going to grow towards. And there is absolutely nothing more fulfilling than staying true to yourself and holding yourself accountable. The fastest and easiest way to build self-esteem. Hold yourself accountable. Have that self-love, have that self-care to make you matter. Make your dreams and your goals and your decisions matter. And they matter because that's what your heart and your soul really wants, really needs, and really craves. So I hope this video has been inspiring for you. Hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.